Being 7 o'clock, I call the Lisle Library District Board meeting for June 17th, 2020 to order. Before we begin, make the announcement that the Lisle Library District recognizes Governor Pritzker's Executive Order number 2020-07 and the Government Emergency Administration Act number 100-06-40, which suspends certain requirements of the Open Meetings Act, allowing library trustees to participate remotely. All motions will require a roll call vote. With that being said, we will do roll call.
Marjorie Bertelli.
Here.
Thomas Duffy.
Here.
Thomas Hummel.
Here.
Karen Larson. Here. Jenny Norton.
Here.
Liz Sullivan.
Here.
Yep, there she's at.
Emily Swipsack.
Here.
Everybody's here. Next item on the agenda is opportunity for visitors to speak. There is no one in the audience. Did we receive any emails from the library email we sent out? So no public comment this evening. Next item on the agenda is the election of officers. We need to elect board president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer for the next 12 months. Can I get a motion for or nomination for board president?
I would like,
Oh, go ahead, Marjorie.
I nominate Thomas Hummel as president of the Board of Trustees of the Lisle Library District.
I'll second.
Karen second. GB, yeah. Are there any nominations? So roll call vote. Any discussion? Any discussion or anything? All right. Roll call, please.
Marjorie Bertelli.
Aye.
Karen Larson. Aye. Thomas Duffy.
Aye.
Thomas Hummel. Jenny Norton.
Aye.
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Emily Swipsack.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you very much, everybody. Next, nominations for vice president.
I nominate Marjorie Bartelli for vice president.
Okay.
Liz.
Liz.
I'll second.
And
I
Karen.
second.
Oh, Karen, yeah, Karen got you. Karen second. Any other nominations? Any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Liz Sullivan.
Aye.
Karen Larson. Aye. Thomas Hummel.
Aye.
Jenny Norton.
Aye.
Emily Swipsack.
Aye.
Marjorie Bertelli.
Aye.
Thomas Duffy.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Yeah, it's just mine.
Thank you.
Passes. Marge, congratulations, Vice President. Next one is secretary. Can I have nomination for secretary?
I nominate Emily Swistack as secretary of the Board of Trustees of the Lisle Library District.
This is Jenny Norton, I
I sec-
second.
Okay. Give it to Bartelli and Norton. Any other nominations? Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Marjorie Bertelli.
Aye.
Jenny Norton.
Aye.
Liz Sullivan.
You got mute?
You can't hear, you have to talk louder, Chris.
Liz Sullivan.
Liz? Can she hear us?
Liz, can you hear?
She said
No,
she
she
can't. She's saying, did you mute the sound on your computer?
Yeah, that changed. Your symbol changed.
Your phone.
Oh, she's gonna go back in and out.
Why don't you call somebody else to come back?
Emily Swistak,
Hi.
Thomas Duffy,
Hi.
Thomas Hubble,
Hi.
Karen Larson. Aye.
I'll give her a second to log in, if not. Let's count 6-0. I'll give her a second, see if she logs in. Can you hear us now, Liz?
Can you hear?
She
Can you
can.
hear us now? Can she try-
Testing,
Yeah.
Liz. Can you hear? Her,
I wonder if
she changed the icon.
Hey, Liz, you know what I think you might have done?
She can't hear.
Is there, see how there's like a phone on the lower right?
Yeah, that is
So I wonder,
the issue.
but I wonder if she just hits camera.
Can you, hey, I can't do this, but Beth, you've got your email up? Can you email her directly and just say, change the icon or the,
Can she see?
Having used these meetings a lot for work, I'm gonna see if there's a chat function that works for her. I'll see if, yeah, she's
Okay.
chatting right now.
Okay,
oh, I see,
you got something chatty?
I see. She can't hear.
Oh, yep. it's
I
there.
got it.
Yep.
Here it is.
Oh, but now she has the microphone and it's,
How about now? Now unmuted.
All
can
right.
she unmute it?
I just,
Because now she's got the right
sent her a
symbol.
message.
How about now?
There she is.
There you go.
Yay!
So-
For some reason, it went away.
Yeah. So do
Sorry,
you-
guys.
So you still got to vote for trustee Swistak for secretary.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Aye. All
I'm
right.
sorry.
That's okay. Next one is treasurer. May I have a nomination for treasurer?
Oh, Jenny for treasurer, please.
Second? Anybody seconding?
I'll
This
second.
is trustee Dodd, second.
Karen already seconded. Liz made the motion and Karen did the second. Any other nominations? Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Karen Larson. Aye. Jenny Norton,
Hi.
Emily Swistak,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Thomas Duffy,
Hi.
Thomas Hubble.
Motion passes. Congratulations, everybody. Next item on the agenda is presidential appointment of Lisle Library District Standing Committees. We'll basically keep them the same as last year because I thought they worked well. The only little minor changes, I'm going to add trustee Sullivan to physical plan as well. So that will give us 4. So pretty much that's how I'll do this year. So the same except for we're adding Liz also to physical plan. Next item on the agenda is assignments for reviewing monthly accounts payable. This past month, I reviewed the May billings in June. Next month, if we're hopefully back up and running or open at least, Treasurer Norton and Trustee Larson will review the June billings in July. If that's still not possible, we'll just continue what we've been doing, and I will review the June billings in July. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I have a motion to pass the consent agenda.
is Trustee Duffy. I move to approve the consent agenda.
A motion, can I have a second, please?
Second.
Can I
Karen?
just ask a question?
Sure, we got a second. Yeah, let's go. Okay, any discussion on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Do we ask questions now or do we pull items to discuss them? I don't know how that works.
Actually, I probably should have, you have something you want to pull? Or just
I just-
discuss?
I more have questions.
Okay, the discussion, so trustee Sullivan, question?
Okay, it's more, and this is not anything that I'm expecting Jenny to answer like right off the bat. But at some point I was wondering, and maybe this is something we can do in a committee meeting. It's just to go over page 9, which is the investment activity sheet. To kind of explain like the top half and then explain the bottom half. So, I don't want to take time now. It's more of something that I'm not quite following. So, does that make sense to do more in a committee meeting, Jenny?
Yeah, absolutely. Or, you and I can certainly correspond offline, just if it's a question that you have, just solely you have, that's not really up for board discussion.
I would like to add, Jenny, that I would be interested. I have a couple questions on the same investment activity sheet. Minor, but I'd like to be included if that's possible.
Yeah, I think we might have an overcrowding.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Or we can do a committee meeting, the two,
Committee meeting.
Yep.
or committee meeting, whatever. Anybody else with a question or trustee Swistak or secretary Swistak?
So I just had, again, usually when I catch things, it's because my name was in there. On page 4 of the packet, so it's page 2 of the draft of the minutes, under staff report 7, at the very bottom paragraph, it says Secretary Swistak stated she was impressed with the director staff's work over the last 2 months, and I think it's missing an and. So that's just, that's typical me, right? So anyway, so I'd like an and put in there between director and staff.
And we won't do a motion or anything or amended motion on that.
That's just a scrivener's error. Yeah.
So, okay, but we'll note it.
Thank you.
You said on page 4, yes?
Yes, it's down at the bottom, under 7 staff reports. It's the last paragraph at the bottom. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question or comment on the consent agenda?
I have a question.
Sure.
On page 26, under the overdrive accounts payable, could Jenny or Tatiana explain to me the per capita grant? We show it, I believe we show it as a charge. There are 3 in particular. Well, 4 actually. I'm a little confused as to if it's a grant. My understanding, a general understanding is a grant is money we have received. And it appears to me from this, and I'm not an accountant, that we're paying out these funds.
We expanded the per capita grant funds on digital content. And that was an intended expense. That's what we asked for in regards to applying for the per capita grant. They asked us how we will spend these funds, and that was one of the categories in which we would expend those funds.
So you're saying this particular month, we are expending that grant on these items for overdrive?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda?
Well, I think tonight's the night for questions. Coronavirus is giving me too much time. So I'm looking at page 12 and I'm looking at the TIF surplus. And I know we're year to date, we have almost $35,000 of revenue. And that's about, we budgeted 35,000. Is that related to Navistar still?
That's all the
I
tips.
think, is it all the TIFs or is it just? the
It's all the tips. Yeah.
It's all the.
Impact
Okay.
fee and Navistar mostly.
So it's Navistar. And what are the other TIFs that we even have going now?
UTI.
Yeah, UTI and then the downtown
Yeah.
TIF.
In downtown, there's the downtown side. I mean, we do have a downtown TIF, but there's nothing going.
But the downtown TIF has never been used or activated, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's not. So this is, I think it's mostly Navistar, probably a little bit of UTI, but I think it's almost all Navistar.
And I believe there's impact fees that come in from Mark on Main, right?
Yeah, but that would be.
That doesn't go in.
That's not in this category? Okay.
Okay, great. That's confusing to me because I don't understand TIFs, but at least now I know where to put it in my mind.
Any other questions, comments on the consent agenda? The
No,
only-
that was it.
Okay. The only comment I have is on the expense report, and I already talked to the director about this. In the prior year to date, it like duplicated or copied the current year to date there, so you might notice the two columns on the expense reports are the same. That will be changed, but the current month activity expense and then the current year to date is correct. Just the prior year, for some reason, copied the current year amount, so that will be corrected.
Yeah, Stickage will take care of that.
So if there's any other questions or no other questions or comments, we'll do a roll call. Chris?
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Karen Larson. Aye. Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Liz Sullivan,
Emily, say hi to your son.
He was in earlier already. He's
Aye.
Emily Swistag,
aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is committee reports. Finance Committee, any report?
None for this meeting.
Personnel Policy,
None at this time.
Physical Plant,
None at this time.
okay. And then Committee of the Whole Budget. I'll just formally retire that committee for this past fiscal year, but we'll be back before you know it here in another 7 months, 8 months. So we will retire that for the time being. The next item on the agenda is executive session. Could somebody read and make a motion to go into executive session? Just got to read the citation under there, 8A.
I move to go
Trustee Duff.
into, I'm sorry.
You're okay. Liz, you can finish.
Okay, I move to go into executive session to discuss the purchase or lease of real property for the use of a public body, including meetings held for the purpose, for discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired.
Can I get a second?
Trustee Duffy, second.
Okay. Any discussion?
I just want to ask a question. I didn't hear the section referenced and maybe my video cut out, but was it okay if we didn't mention that? in the motion.
Did she mention $5? She do all that? Hey, Liz, actually, you know what? Why don't you withdraw your motion and restate it? And you gotta, good catch, Jenny, and you gotta read like the 5 ILCS 120, that whole number. So just read
Got it.
read 8.
Okay, so I withdraw my previous motion and I'll make a new one.
Yeah.
And I move to go into executive session for 5 ILCS 120/2 C5. Let's see, to discuss purchase or lease of real property for the use of a public body, including meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Trustee Duffy, second.
All right, trustee Duffy, second. Any comments or questions on this? If the roll call, Chris?
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Emily Swistak,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Karen Larsmith. Aye. Thomas Hummel.
Motion passes. We will go into executive session at 7:22. Okay, being 8 o'clock, we are back in an open session. The next item on the agenda is unfinished business, facility options, CCS, update and discussion. I know there was a one-page
Outline.
if you will, in your packet. I think we can get it ready. We got it, right?
Yes.
So we could just go through this. Mark, do you want to take over?
Sure, I'll just go.
No,
All right. Okay.
Mark can walk us through the outline.
Okay.
No problem. I'll keep it somewhat brief for some of these, but as you're following along, I'll start with point A right on the top. We have reached out to Flaherty and Collins a few times. As what I just heard, or what we've heard from other village meetings, Flaherty and Collins has not really gone anywhere as far as I'm aware. The last I heard from them was early April, where they said they were still reviewing the information from the village's economic report and TIF district. I've reached out 3 different times since then via phone call and have not heard back. So I think the next step for us would be just to send an email letter saying, please be aware we've reached out, we have not heard back, and let us know if there's any updates and go from there. But I think that kind of leads us down the path to these developers are somewhat waiting to see what the market does, waiting to see what their business impacts are before they're putting money down on the line again. We are seeing construction, just so everyone knows as a quick aside, we are seeing construction go on in the area. And it's not like construction projects have stopped. It's just some of the planning has shifted from something that's going full steam ahead now to 3-4 month lagging and then restarting or plans for restarting. But that's just an aside so you're aware. We also have been trying to keep tabs if there's been any other outside developer interest in the Village of Lisle. There was one that we had heard might be of interest, so we did place a phone call to just inquire. They said they were going to talk internally and see what their true interest was in the Village of Lisle's downtown area in general. And if they were interested, then they'd potentially be open to a conversation with the library. But it wasn't like they had plans right now. They didn't have any land or any deals or anything like that to have contracts in place. So that was more of an informal thing that we'll just keep tabs on as we move forward. So the synopsis for downtown developers, really there's not been much movement. And I think partly it's due to the COVID-19 situation and everyone kind of scrambling there. Any questions on that before moving on? All right. Next one would be the design consultant request for qualifications. This is something the last time I met with, or I was present at the board meeting was in March. And at that point in time, it was decided that we would start developing draft RFQ documents, which we did do in advance of April's board meeting. We basically started with the preliminary draft just to start reviewing with staff. The plan was to kind of polish those off to make sure that we got the right information to the library board for you to fill in the blanks. At that point in time, it was, COVID-19 kicked in earnest, and we said, you know what, we're going to hold off until we can kind of get through the heat of what that was, which is, I think, about where we're at now. Depending how things go, maybe over the next month, we could, relook at that with staff and see what the next steps are with those 2 draft documents, and maybe have another continued discussion on that in July at this point. It's something maybe for you to look at if the board would like us to do that. President Hummel, I defer to you if you want.
I think it still I think it merits pursuing in July, kind of filling in the blanks and determining our needs, assigning our priorities. We've had a lot of discussion, and I think it'll get the board back on track with, our heads in it again. I just want to know if the board is open to starting that way in July.
All right, I'll go in, I'll kind of go around the horn here, and I'm going to start from the middle here. Trustee or Treasurer Norton.
I would like to get back on that track as soon as it's possible.
Trustee Sullivan. You're still on mute. You can tell her she's still on mute.
You're on mute, Liz. Thank you.
Agreed with Jenny.
Secretary Swistak.
I agree with both Jenny and Liz.
Vice President Bartelli.
Yes, does that include both new facilities and/or renovations?
We would structure this so it could be applicable to both.
Okay, yes, I agree.
Trustee Duffy.
I agree with everyone outside of Secretary Stack. I'm good with everything.
And Trustee Larson.
I agree.
So we have a consensus. So yeah, we're good to go on that one. And so then in July.
We'll have a template.
Yeah.
Right. We'll have some blanks to fill in and outline that process further for you. So that's perfect. All right, we'll get running on that again. The next point on here, and this was a bit more of a discussion, and we'll see how we kind of manage this for the go-to meeting. But what I'll do is maybe start out and kind of go over a high level of how we're thinking, and then maybe President Hummel, if you want to go around and ask if there's questions, I can respond to those questions on each trustee member or board member. So, we're looking at this in 2 things in terms of the COVID-19 impact on library buildings. One is, knowing what we've gone through here, what are the immediate impacts for things that are happening right now? And 2 is, how do we plan for buildings in the future, and what considerations are meaningful? It's kind of one and the same. The first thing that we look at when building planning is, okay, how did libraries need to react to be able to reopen and to continue providing space? One of the things that CCS has noticed across multiple libraries is really a need for handling materials because of having to clean them, to isolate them for a period of time, whether it was 72 hours or 48 hours or whatever that was. You need to have some space for that. Obviously it's being now with social distancing, being aware of, like when you go to the Jewel in Lisle and you see the little placards on the floor, go down this aisle, don't go down that aisle, and everything else. How do you manage traffic? How do you put the little plastic dividers up between staff, receptionists, or concierge and patrons? How do you make sure that there is the right parking set up to do curbside pickup and not put anyone in conflict with trying to walk up and grab books or leave books, and making sure that staff can get the books easily? So things like that we look at. And what we want to do is take a look at how that compares to the needs assessment that we did previously. One of the things that jumps out to us is COVID-19 is something that ideally we all like to think that there's going to be a vaccine here soon for it. And I think Jenny, you had hit on it before, within the next 2 years, are we going to design these big buildings with massive storage areas and then 2 years from now not need it and have this open space you have to maintain but don't get to use? And that is a concern. So it's building in the flexibility, in my opinion, that, you know, I look back at your old space needs analysis that we did, and your existing building has roughly just under 1,400 square feet of storage space combined, multiple rooms. You know, it doesn't need to go to 5,000 square feet, but it's setting those storage rooms up in a space where they can be flexible, that if you need to isolate materials for 72 hours, it's partitionable, it's an open space that can be devised right and done right. And that becomes the design planning process. I don't see, or we don't foresee a need to go and do a much larger building. We think it's more just how you're going to plan the space. You can still do the same collection aisles, right? But you have to maybe think about how wide are these aisles, and is it one-way traffic or two-way traffic? Things of that nature that you'd get on in the design process, not so much in, do we need a bigger building? So you probably don't. Not for the long term. You're also setting yourself up for bigger expenses long term. So in our opinion, and looking at our libraries, you know, we're looking at, okay, how do we do curbside pickups? How do we maintain space for virtual resources, you know, server spaces and things of that nature? You know, how do we limit access to areas? You know, if some libraries are opening up just the computer spaces first, you know, you have to make a reservation for those, and then you have an hour to use it and you have to check out. Some libraries are actually saying they're doing hour-long visits that are, you can check in to the library, and at 60 minutes, you're asked to leave the library. There's these different things that, you know, okay, if you're going to do that, what does that mean to your entry and access points for guests? And where do you have them queue? And do you want them waiting outside at that point, or do you want them waiting inside in an entry foyer? All these things. But again, just going back to it, I don't believe it's a bigger building is the answer. I think it's more smart planning and being flexible. With that being said, the only other thing that we were thinking about is staff, because we even talked about it here is, you know, with the library is how many staff are in the building versus out of the building, and do you need all those spaces? And the short answer, I think, for long term is yes, you will need those spaces, because you need to maintain buildings. You need to provide people an opportunity of working spaces. You know, in the meantime, though, it's making sure that those spaces that are being designed, you have an opportunity to social distance. You're not putting 3 people in, you know, a 50 square foot room and expecting them all to work, unless you're planning on having shifts later on down if this were to happen. But in the long run, I think we have to be cognizant of that space planning, and that is something that we'll have to, as we go into that RFQ process with designers, we're going to press them to see what their thoughts are and how they're adapting their mindsets to make sure that they're thinking about these things as well. And at the end of the day, you're going to have a building, whether it's renovation or new, that fits the needs of the COVID-19 world, which we know it's a risk. So how do we mitigate that risk? That's really at the bottom line. Does that make sense?
Director Weiss, do you have anything to add, or?
No, I appreciate the wrap up. I'll have more information in my director's report about how I had a conference with maybe 30 other library directors and on their approach to reopening. And there's some consensus opinions on that, and then there's some divergent opinions. So I'll share that. But no, Mark, you did a great kind of encapsulation of what I think we need to focus on.
So one thing actually I forgot to mention, I'll just make a note for the board if you haven't already looked at it. The ALA, their website has a number of resources on there that talk about COVID-19, and actually just on Friday, they did a survey. I think they surveyed 1,500 different libraries about just what concerns are out there and things to go in the future. It's a 7-minute video if you wanted to go on there and take a look, but just there are resources out there if you guys are interested, not only just in the building side, but as Tatiana just said, on the operation side of one of these impacts to think about.
That would be.
Does anybody have any question or comments for Mark Rogers? Because we're going to talk about some of this too, also under the director's report. Does anybody have any comments specific to Mark Rogers? If you do, just kind of wave your hand, just so maybe the time.
Did you say that the video was on the ILA or the ALA?
ALA.
Okay. And it's a 7-minute video on COVID-19 and what they're doing about it?
Not really what they're doing. It was a
I'll find
survey.
the link and I'll send it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Tatiana.
Anybody else have a question or comment for Mark?
The only other question that I had is, and maybe this is better saved for Tatiana's portion, but one thing that I saw at Glen Ellen's library was a drive-through type of service for people picking up. And I know we've gotten feedback that some of our constituents would like curbside pickup to continue. And I was just wondering if in the back of our minds and, you know, in what you're doing, Mark, if we want to keep that as an option.
So I would think that, yes, that would be something you'd want to keep as a goal, or, you know, I'll call it a need for now, but something to put on that needs list of how do we plan for that? You know, is there a curbside, or in the future, is that a, you know, a drive-through aisle or something of that nature that a lot of libraries have? You know, we just finished Villa Park and that has one there. They're not using it necessarily right now with COVID because of the interaction of people and collections, but it is something that we can put on the list.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question or comment for Mark Rogers? All right. All right. Well, thank you, Mark, again, for your input.
No problem. I'll hang out for a bit to hear about the reports, and I appreciate your time here.
All right. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is staff reports. First one is director report. I'll turn it over to Director Weinstein to see if she's got anything to add. I think she does.
I do. Well, I've got some information from my conference with other directors, but I do want to begin with a mention about COVID-19, public health in general, and the library. We've been closed to the public as of March 13th, and since then we've had a board meeting in May and now a June meeting. And the staff have continued to provide increasing degrees of public service, which include the open book drop, email and phone communications with patrons, home delivery service, curbside pickup service, and most recently, the take and make craft kits for both adults, teens, and kids. Staff have also coordinated servicing the facility with regular maintenance appointments from our HVAC, plumbing, electrical, fire safety, and cleaning vendors. We've also continued to work staggered shifts here to maintain those proper social distancing protocols, and everyone on premises is required to wear a mask once they enter the building, and that includes our vendors, as long as if they can keep 6 feet of space between them, they can remove the mask. We're also continuing to quarantine all our materials for 4 days, and that's exceeding the 72-hour recommendation of the Northeast Document Conservation Center. And that report link was referenced in my director's report for anyone who wants to read it. And so as we are still in phase 3, many local businesses are reopening in a limited fashion with outdoor seating, as I'm sure we're all aware. And some of what they're calling the non-essential stores have allowed restricted in-person shopping. And so as a library, we're also talking about, and we're in the middle of planning for reopening to the public. And I've consulted with the department directors and the staff who inventory and order our PPE supplies, as well as a conference with other area library directors. And as I mentioned, we just had a conference on Monday, and I'll get to those details in just a second. So we are approximately 3 months into the awareness of this virus, and there are still conflicting reports out there regarding susceptibility, transmission, and projections for a vaccine. And as you all know, approximately 2.5 weeks ago, a lot of states opened for Memorial Day, and there are spikes now of COVID-19. And I did reference a link in the report, in the director's report, of that particular spike report. So we hope we don't see a spike here in Illinois, especially with the recent protests. However, we'll continue to follow the state case reporting to determine the best path forward for us in our reopening efforts. So for the safety of both the public and staff, I believe the library should take a measured approach to staffing and services while we plan for reopening, and we'll talk about that approach now. So last week, I asked the trustees to think about some of the questions I I sent them some questions, and we'll go over some of the feedback I received from the other directors. So if you see in your report, we'll start with that bullet point list of questions. And the number one question there is, will the library limit the amount of people in the building once we reopen? How many people will we allow? And how are we going to enforce those numbers? And before we open, I'll go point by point, and then if trustees want to add, feel free. But I will, after each point, I'll let you know what the other department, keep calling them department directors, the other directors of other libraries have said. So in my conference regarding this particular bullet point, other libraries are using the retail model of 5 people per 1,000 square feet and then cutting that number in half, just to be safe about things. So if we say we have, let's say, 20,000 square feet of public space, and that's taking out staff space, mechanical areas, and storage, we'd come to 100 and then divided. That would show that we allow 50 people in the building at a time. That's what most libraries are doing. They're taking a really conservative approach at allowing people in the building, because the 5 people per 1,000 square feet, most of the directors said that's just too many right now. And then as for enforcement, most directors will have staff speak with patrons who've overstayed their welcome, but that's as far as they'll go with the approach. They're going to ask people to leave the building if they stay after an hour of time, or whatever that library determines is the right amount of time. So any comments or opinions regarding the number of people in the building? And we haven't set a date yet or anything, but I just want to talk about these questions.
I'll go through alphabetically. The only thing I got to ask, out of that 50 number, does that include staff or not?
That doesn't include staff because it's a halved number of that original calculation.
Okay, so I'll go alphabetically for this one. Marge, Vice President Bartelli.
As far as enforcement, people that overstay their time limit, having staff speak to patrons is fine, but I'm not quite sure there's an actual enforcement. Just FYI, the grocery stores, I realize this is a whole different ballgame, but there's a big issue of the employees trying to enforce the guidelines. And I realize we do not have a union, but the union is claiming, that is not the employee's job. That is, be it management, I guess management would be the board, in a sense, the library board, or you, Tatiana, as director. I think it could get dicey. I'm not saying it can't be done, and I would hope most of our patrons would be completely civil, but there is an issue with enforcement as far as where it comes from. So just my comment. Thanks.
Do you want to answer? I'm going to still keep going.
I would go around, but I agree with you. Enforcement of anything can be an issue, whether it's how many people are in the building or the behavior of the people while they're in the building. And so the people in charge during the day, or if I'm working the evening shift, it is me, or we have a chain of command. We have a person in charge list. So any behavior issue is taken up with the person in charge, and they handle that situation. And of course, if we ever run into an issue where it requires more enforcement, we will call the correct authorities.
Trustee Duffy.
Well, I was just trying to look. I know we have a corrective patron code of conduct, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And when I look at this, so first of all, to answer your question on the 50, I'm fine with that. I think that's an acceptable number at the beginning. You can always increase it as you want. To the second point about enforcement of either a mask or overstaying your welcome, I mean, that's part of the code of conduct. And if they're not following the policies set out by the library and the board, that independent of if it was these or other actions they were doing, the consequences are laid out within that conduct. They would be asked to leave. So, I mean, I agree with you, Vice President Bartelli. Not the easiest thing to enforce, but it's probably the best we can do is approaching them and asking them to leave. And if they continue to not do it, well, then, you know, I know we've outlined in the code of conduct the remediation that does occur.
Good point.
Steve Larson.
Yeah, the rules is good, following the code of conduct. I don't think you're really getting.
Karen, I cannot, I'm sorry. Am I the only one who cannot hear?
She did.
She said that she's okay with the 50 for now, and that she doesn't think there will be a large issue regarding asking people to leave or having any behavioral issues. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Thanks.
All right. Treasurer Norton.
First of all, I want to say, as I've said in the past, I have a high degree of confidence in Director Weinstein and the department heads or directors and staff in terms of making the determination of what is going to be best practices as we move forward. But as far as recommendations and my own specific thoughts, 50, okay, fine for starters, but I think prepare yourselves that not everyone is going to be a model citizen in terms of social distancing. Speaking from my own personal experience being out and about with my newborn daughter, you would think if anyone was going to defer, they might defer to a baby carriage, but not so much. And so, you know, and again, with the employees having to be the ones enforcing this, you know, it can get tricky. So just keep in mind, you might have to adapt, and that adapting might mean doing something like the Morton Arboretum did, which was going to, now they're bringing people back now in time slots, and you can only get in during certain times and for certain times, and that's, you know, that's difficult to manage too. But just sort of think down the road for other ways that you might have to do this, or you know, because I know we don't want to turn patrons away. I know we also don't want to impair patron safety while they're there and, you know, make people uncomfortable. So it's a tricky thing, and you know, just sort of keep going down the path you're doing, which is, you know, talking to other libraries and finding out what they're doing, looking at other organizations, seeing what's working, what's not. Might be a combination of appointments, you know, number of people limitation, and enforcement, and maybe some other things I haven't thought of, but I think it's going to have to be a multifaceted approach.
Thank you. Trustee Sullivan.
I agree with Trustee Norton. I like what the Morton Arboretum did. I know that they only allowed members in, and I'm almost thinking that in order to get in while we're limiting people, we should probably only cater to LLD members who are, you know, card holders, rather than just open it to anybody. I like the 50, and I like the idea of having people make appointments.
I have to step in. Your idea is not, has not been discussed, but we cannot legally close our doors to the public. We can legally limit special services like curbside to card holders, but as a public library, if we open the building, we can't stop somebody from outside of our district of entering.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
The other idea that I thought of is maybe the library has 2-hour time slots. And on days, and I'm just going to make this up. So on days we open at 9, you know, anybody who comes in between 9 and 11 they're told when they come in that the library, everybody's got to leave at 11. And you let up to 50 people in, you clear the library at 11, and then from 11 to 1 is potentially another 2-hour time slot. And so the first 50 people can come in, and then you clear the library at 1. And it would take a lot of communication to make it work. But I think we've seen the library do a really good job of communicating through the website, through social media, and other methods. And maybe that way people wouldn't feel like they're not getting a shot at the library, you know, and yet people, it prohibits people from staying like 8 hours at the library. Just food for thought.
Secretary Swistak?
Okay, so I agree with the number 50. I think that's a good place to start and kind of see how it goes. You know, I feel like some of what has already been said leads into some of the other questions, the other bullet points that we, you know, that we're going to address. But it's kind of hard because they really are so tied together in the whole process of opening the building again. It's tough. I mean, it's very tough to figure out what is the best thing to do for the library, for staff, for the patrons. And you know, you don't want to make the wrong decision, right? So you really have to think about it. I like the idea of scheduling times for people to come in. We would have to figure out a way to say, if it's not just a scheduled time that fills up with those 50 people, then how do you monitor that? Is someone going to be stationed at the entrance to the library and say, okay, well, you know, we can only take this many people in, and no, you can't come in right now? Or is someone going to be, would someone be responsible to have that job stationed at the main entrance and then turning people away or letting them come in as someone else goes out? You know, things to think about as far as that goes too. But some of my other things are in further questions, so I'll stop for now and wait until those topics come up.
Just a quick question to follow up, because I know, has there been discussion about doing scheduled times?
There are a number of libraries there's one library who's doing reservations, which that's unique. But some are doing scheduled times. Some are opening just for a morning shift and then having a break so wipe downs can happen. And then there's an afternoon shift and wipe downs, and then an evening shift and there's wipe downs. Some are, the 50 is, I think, a manageable number because each department, each floor can keep an eye on the number of people that are in their department. And if we determine that 50-ish is our number, we can assign someone in each department to be kind of a looker, a seer, and keep an eye on those 15 people in that department, and then intervene if they see someone lingering, and see if a new person walks in and spends time in that department. So there's a number of ways we can tackle this, and we can, I can work with my department heads. I just wanted to know what the board how the board feels about having a 50-ish number, and how you enforce that 50.
So I think it sounds like we're pretty all much in agreement with 50, but you're still looking for, what do you think, like, what our advice on how to enforce that?
No, I think I got that. Mm-hmm. You want to move on?
Yeah, move on.
Okay. And maybe
Next bullet point, sorry.
that's fine. So the next bullet point is, what happens if a patron refuses to wear a mask in the building? And so in my conference, all the libraries will provide masks at the doors. So that's an expense to the library, and also provide gloves if patron wants them. So we can do either or both. Also having signage up around the building about the requirement for wearing mask or face covering. And then asking patrons to leave if they walk in without a mask and refuse to put on a mask. So that's the plan. And I wanted to know what the board thought of having a requirement for masks, which I think that's the law right now, and what to do about someone who refuses to wear a mask. And this, we've already kind of touched upon that.
We will, I'll go with Vice President Bartelli again to start.
Well, I guess I keep coming back to what I've experienced in the village, particularly in the dining venue. I printed off the governor's requirements of the phase we're in right now. And it's pretty obvious. I realize we're not a restaurant, but it's obvious there's quite a bit of nonconformance. I hesitate to say also, the police department is not necessarily enforcing, and I understand our code of conduct. It's all stated there. I really think it's going to be tough because some officials are willing to enforce. I think there are some that, you know, are more on the side of just ignoring it. Maybe it'll go away. So that would be my comment.
I will say this before we move on, is that if someone, a couple of directors mentioned, and I thought this was a good idea, I mean, this might help or not, but if someone refuses to wear a mask and demands, you know, that they have a right to library materials, I mean, offering curbside, letting them know that there's a curbside option, but that the facility is requiring masks. And if they do not wish to wear a mask, then they will have to opt for curbside. So
Sorry.
if we continue curbside.
Mhm. Good idea.
Is there going to be an exemption for?
Talk out loud so everybody can.
Is there an exemption for people with medical?
Yes, there is.
Trustee Duffy.
When I saw these questions, I took a lot of these questions also because I know one of our core patron bases is the elderly, who this, you know, COVID-19 is much more dangerous even to them than others. And, you know, I have a very strict policy. They cannot be in that building without a mask on. Offering it to them and doing everything else is key. So I take a little more of a stricter policy on it.
If I could just, are we going to start up home delivery? I know for like seniors or anything.
We already have.
Oh, that's right. Never mind. Trustee Larson.
Yeah, the face mask is definitely required. But, you know, the governor stated that, I mean, Naperville's requiring it, and if you don't have one.
In here.
She mentioned Naperville and having a requirement, and if you don't have a mask, you cannot come in.
Like last week, I went to the doctor and I had to go to Good Sam before I could even see in the building and have a mask, I had to do temperature, you know, you want to protect your staff. You want to protect other patients.
So you're for a more stricter
Yeah.
policy? Okay. Treasurer Norton.
I just want to make sure we're on bullet point 2 or 3 now. Sorry, I'm a little lost.
We're still at 2. We're still at
Okay.
2.
All right. So in terms of, yes, they need to wear a mask. If they refuse to wear a mask, yes, we point them towards curbside. I think, you know, you kind of go with your best laid plan. And then if you get more than the occasional difficult patron may have to consider more stringent restrictions on the facility as a whole. You know, you start out saying, you know, here's the privileges for everybody. That's pretty much exactly what happened with the Arboretum. The Arboretum shut down when people were not social distancing enough. And so, you know, we don't want to have to take privileges away, but, you know, in the interest of safety, that's what it comes to. That's what it comes to.
Trustee Sullivan.
The other thing is, I think we should reserve the right to call the police. And I can send you an email, Tatiana, that they sent out as a result of a question that came up in Monday night's meeting. And the answer to the question is, will the police enforce mask wearing? And what the police will do in Lisle is they will come out and they will take the approach of education. But, and I don't think they're going to haul anybody to jail, but I would think that, you know, if you call the police because somebody's not wearing a mask, and I mean, people can get really weird about this stuff. And if you have somebody that you totally cannot handle, I think the police would find a way to escort them out of the building. So I think that that could be the avenue of last resort. You know, I don't, like I said, they're not going to haul them off to jail, but I think they would solve your problem for that instance, for that moment in time.
Secretary Swistak.
Oh, sorry. I just want to echo what other trustees have said, that I think it's really important that it's mandated that they wear masks if they're coming into the building. I like the idea of the library having PPE available for patrons that come in. If they don't have them themselves, it'll be offered to them as they come in. I think that is that's really beneficial. Then it kind of takes away the, oh, I forgot mine at home excuse that some people might have. It's no, we're going to provide it for you. And I think it is, important to say, like, this is what's mandated right now in the interest of safety and protecting yourself and protecting others. So I think that's that's important as well.
Okay, so.
Moving on.
Yep.
Okay, bullet point number 3, should curbside pickup service continue be limited? So the libraries I spoke with are divided about continuing to provide curbside, and this is due to a number of reasons. The number one reason being the staffing involved. While you're still open, it does take a lot of coordination, from the receipt of the request to the logistics of bagging the books and then scheduling them, and then to the physical staffing when you're providing the materials at the pickup stations. However, some libraries have drive-up windows, as Mark has mentioned, and that makes it much easier to continue curbside. So those libraries more than likely will. And some libraries are going to stop curbside because of their parking lots, that the parking lots will accommodate both a curbside pickup and then having just general population parking in their lot to come in. But saying all that, we have had a number of requests to continue curbside. I've forwarded a preliminary report of some postcard surveys that have come in, and you can see that so far the majority of curbside users would like us to continue. We should start receiving some more responses. I know we got some more in today that didn't make this particular report that you were forwarded, so we will continue to share those with you as they roll along. But if we continue curbside once we reopen, we might want to consider limiting the days to maybe once a week. So once the library is open to the public and we allow 50 people in, we may have like one day that is still reserved for people who are uncomfortable coming into the building, because there are those. And we've heard through email, on some of the postcards, some of the commentary, that some people and some other libraries have mentioned that people are still uncomfortable with coming in. And I know that Naperville stopped curbside service, and on earlier posts, there were a number of patrons really upset that they were stopping their curbside. But again, I think this was in regards to their layout, it was going to make it difficult for them to continue curbside, as well as the staffing issue. So anyway, things to consider, but I know that there is a request to continue.
So I think it should continue. Sorry, were you thinking about cutting it down to just one day, or that's up for discussions?
I think that's what we're talking
Okay,
about.
well, if you're gonna, what staff, I guess my question is, what does staff think? Would you prefer to cut it down to one day, or?
I think that is the more manageable route if we're going to open to the public. And again, this all depends on how we are open to the public. Are we opening normal hours? Are we opening in shifts? I mean, there's a lot to consider.
I would probably prefer to maybe just cut it down to twice a week if that's doable. If it's too tough and you only think once is more manageable, I guess I'm okay with it. I would just maybe like to see go from 3 to 2 first, but that's my opinion. We'll go in reverse order. Secretary Swistat.
I personally would like to see some type of curbside pickup remaining, even while the building is open. So if it can still happen, even if it's limited, I think that's a great idea for patrons who do not want to come into the building, aren't comfortable being out in public yet. All of that, I think it's very important to continue that.
Trustee Sullivan.
I agree.
Treasurer Norton.
I think not only the statistics of how many people have used curbside so far really speak for the need for the program, but I think as we see, if we're going to limit capacity to 50 patrons at a time, and especially as we talked about in the previous bullet point, if there are some who refuse to wear a mask, then we really do want to have a place to divert the overflow or the people who are not complying. But balancing that, of course, with the staff resources, which I hope that would, you guys have been able to adapt and toggle from one thing to another. And if, for example, we're not having major indoor programs like we've had, then the timing that was allocated there can still support curbside and other things like that.
Trustee Larson.
Yeah, I think we do need the curbside, and like touching, I was saying maybe one day a week would be sufficient. I don't know, from the point.
And that can be adjusted.
Right, just see what maybe people want, maybe end of the week.
So in case anybody couldn't hear, Trustee Larson's agreeing with.
Yeah, Trustee Larson agreed to do one day a week and then see how it goes.
Trustee Duffy.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to disagree in the sense that I don't want any limitations on the curbside throughout the week. And I guess this is my take. We have a service that we created that clearly the community picked up very quickly and has responded very well to. And by limiting it to 1 day or 2 days a week, it will undoubtedly lead to people being unable to get their books in the time that they've already gotten now. And we're actually potentially driving them back into the space where we're also limiting the amount of people that can go in that space. So we could actually create a scenario where we have a disruption of service, or we're forcing certain patrons to have to wait longer or potentially go into a building that they couldn't want to go. I mean, I take a little bit of a different track. I think curbside for basically a lot of these basic pickups of books is probably where you're going to want a lot of your services to be during the COVID era. Doing it once or twice a week, you're going to have people that are going to have to wait 2, 3, or 4 weeks to pick up books, because if we're getting 100 pickups in a day, imagine if we limited those to twice, how would we be able to do 1,000 pickups, you know, if you extrapolate that over a two times a week type deal. That would be a little bit my concern, which is I personally think it's a great program, and I don't want to see it. I would actually expand it. I would do deliveries to the elderly. I don't want anyone that has to come into that building unless they choose to do so, and they're going in there for a purpose.
I can speak to that. So we can expand it in terms of hours and number of people who are able to utilize it in the time slots that are currently laid out. And I think you make a good point about initiating, well, I won't say initiating the service because we've already initiated, but when we open our doors, perhaps we see if we can manage to continue the 3 and see how many people are willing to come into the building in person, and then adjust as we go. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I know everyone on this board has probably gotten emails or neighbors telling us that they liked it. I've used it a couple of times. It was great. I think it's probably something that even, I'll be blunt, and I know Mark's on the call, but it's kind of one of those where I see post-COVID, this is probably not a service that goes away for a lot of libraries. Because as people learn about how
I agree
to
with
use
that.
this, yeah, it's just going to stay. And I think leaning in hard on this, making sure people can actually use it a lot, also keeps, it actually protects our staff too, in the sense that those 50 people that walk in, you're actually distilling down who's coming into your building so that you have a better idea of how to service those. Because the people that just want the books and they got them, they're just picking them up through the curbside.
Trustee Larson, do you want to add something?
Yeah, like how many people on a day for like pickup? How many slots were scheduled for that day, or how many people actually came and picked up?
Okay, so the question from Trustee Larson was how many slots were reserved and how many picked up? And that report is in the packet. There's a little chart, and I don't have the page number, I'm sorry, but it's in the director's report, and it shows that just on 5/19, there were 96 reservations and 93 pickups.
It's page 40 in the packet.
Page 40 in the packet. So in general, most of the slots are full and most of the people pick up. And you can see, and I didn't do the average, but on average, we are giving out, I'd say between 600 and 700 items every day that we provide curbside.
I agree with Trustee.
Did everybody get a
No,
chance?
I get, Mark, I was going to just check. No, I agree with what Trustee Duff said. That's what I was saying, is that maybe just reducing it from 3 to 2 if you're going to reduce it. But I mean, if you could handle keeping it at 3 or so, that would probably be good too. And like I asked too, we are delivering to seniors. We are the senior pick.
That's a separate program, but yes.
It's been going on, yeah. All right, Vice President Bartelli.
I agree with all of the comments. I think it should continue. I do think we should probably stick to the time slots we have now, rather than expand it. That's it.
Okay. Is that everybody?
Yes, do you have
Okay, we can.
direction on how for everything on that one, or?
Yeah. And I'll have to assess the staffing and all that, and I think we can manage that. Next bullet point is, will patrons be allowed to linger, study, or sit in the building once we're open? Or will this phase only allow for browse, grab, and go? Now, most of the directors I spoke with are planning for a grab and go only. And then that also means no public programming in the building. So no programs in the meeting rooms, no group book groups, no friends of the Lisle Library District. And they're talking about that lasting through the summer, through the fall.
So the question is, should we just have a grab and go? Pretty much.
Do you have a recommendation for us?
Sure. I am in the camp of a browse, grab, and go, and not having group gatherings. And I would say through the fall, unless something magical happens.
So we'll do reverse order again. Secretary.
Could I recommend something? If we all agree with her recommendation, can we just raise our hands? I mean, I'm just concerned that this is going to take a really long time. I don't know if everybody can go that way.
I mean, we could.
Or if someone has comment, maybe raise their
I
hand.
guess if we want to do that, if we just want to do a show of hands, but if you have, because I do want to let people speak if they want to speak. So if anybody's got something to add,
Raise their hand.
I'll quickly go through. But I mean, we could do that. Does everybody agree with the director's recommendation? Show of hands.
Any comments?
Okay, so that's everybody. Anybody?
I have a
Secretary?
comment.
Yeah.
So it kind of ties into on the next page where it says some other questions. And where the first one, the how will libraries manage browsing? Because I do agree with the browse, grab, and go, but there is that question of what it says, when a patron pulls a book and then wants to return to the shelf, does it go into quarantine? What happens to that? And I think that's an important part of it too. You know, if we're trying to limit touching of materials, right? And if it needs to go into quarantine then. So I think that's part of it as well. I mean, I really think it's important that at the beginning phase to just do the browse, grab, and go, and not sit and linger and, you know, any of that stuff. It's just to basically collect materials and go. But that is an important part that goes into it, I think.
Trustee Sullivan, anything to add? No. Treasurer Norton?
Just that while I totally agree with this for now, I think obviously as we move forward into the fall, we're going to take cues from what other organizations like schools are doing and determining whether and when to open up other things like meeting space.
Thank you. Trustee Larson? Trustee Duffy, anything to add to this? Vice President Bartelli?
No.
Okay.
Next one.
All right. Will computers be open to the public? Will they be limited? And how long will we allow people to use them? So here, the libraries I spoke with are divided. Some will only allow 30-minute use, some an hour, some won't allow for PC use at all. Some are only allowing people to come in and use the PC because there's a lack of internet in their communities. What I would recommend is that we have limited use and proper social distancing space. I've talked to the department directors about this in youth services and adult services, and we were looking at anywhere between 30 minutes and 40 minutes of use. Here we have a program that would log somebody off automatically after their use time. And so that's where we are. I think it's important as a public library for those in our community who don't have internet access to be able to utilize a computer, print something off if they need it. But then again, I would like to limit that time spent on the PC and allow for the cleaning of the equipment and all of that fun stuff.
So we'll do the same thing and then I'll go around one time. Show of hands, do we agree with the director's recommendation?
Okay.
I think most, but comments. We'll go alphabetical. Vice President Bartelli. Any comment or question on this?
Does it make any sense, Tatiana, to possibly have reservations for computer use?
Well, we have enough computers, I think, we could do that. We have enough computers, I think, that can accommodate those who would come in and utilize them. But we do have the ability, I mean, if we're gonna open the building up and only allow like 50 people within an hour, having 30 minutes on the computer, we have the ability to log somebody off within that 30-minute time frame.
I think that suffices. I think that's a good idea.
And everything is adjustable, so we can change this as we go if we see there's a need.
Thank you.
Trustee Duffy?
Well, I mean, I agree on the concept of limiting. I guess I disagree with the kind of time slot of 30 minutes. And the only reason I'm coming from is you have a lot of people out of work, a lot of people need to do job searching, a lot of people need to do online coursework. 30 minutes to 45 minutes probably isn't a sufficient period to do some of that stuff. So I think that's why I thought maybe an hour, but then I liked the idea of, from Vice President Bartelli, like if you need the computer for an hour, there's some type of reservation system or something to that effect. I just don't want 30 minutes because at that point, you could be interfering, like some of these people they do need this resource to navigate this period.
Yeah, we can adjust the time to whatever we feel. So an hour, if that's the consensus, that's fine.
So Trustee Duffy, would you want to increase it to an hour?
Yeah, and of course I just voted for the browse, grab and go. So really I'm sending mixed signals here. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm fine with the hour, but I like Vice President Bartelli's idea of some type of, the grab and go is one thing, the computer use is another thing, and that maybe does require some type of additional sign up, whatever you want to call it. But that way, you know it's for an hour, it gets after, all that kind of stuff in between.
Is that easy to manage?
We can do that.
You can do that? So basically you're looking for maybe like reserve for the hour then? I'll double back. Vice President Bartelli, you okay with that then?
Yes.
Okay. Trustee Larson?
Reserve for an hour, normal for 30, 35 minutes. Yeah, that's fine.
Treasurer Norton?
I agree with Trustee Duffy, 100%. The only thing I have to add in the same spirit of trying to maximize benefit here is there a way for the internet access to reach the parking lot, and therefore you could have some people from their cars who have their own device be able to kind of park and surf? I don't know, I just made that. Whatever you want to call it.
Do you want us to discuss that now or later?
We can talk about that. We have upgraded our wireless access points, and we did install an extra access point. We currently have signage in our parking lots that let people know that when the library is not open, you cannot park in our lots. So that is I think that is a personal policy committee discussion about whether we want to change or adopt a policy that provides for Wi-Fi after hours. And I know you're probably talking, Treasurer Norton, about using it while the building's open, but if we have this ability, we may have people in our lots at 2 a.m. So I think that's something to think about and discuss, but we do have that capability, yes.
Trustee Sullivan?
I like the 1 hour. I like reservations. I like Wi-Fi in the parking lot. I think it should be unrestricted. I don't think it should be only when the library's open. And I think if we coordinate with the police, I mean, I think the police, they park places all the time. They park across the street from me and they just sit there. I think they'd be more than willing to take passes through the parking lot at the library in the middle of the night. They're great people, but they do sit and they look for trouble. So if we let them know that we're going to have people there, I think they'd be more than willing to put the library lot on their, you know, either where they sit and look for speeders or go through from time to time. So that's my thoughts.
Secretary Swistak.
So I like the idea of reservation time for the computer use also. To Trustee Duffy's point about 30 minutes or 45 minutes might not be enough for some of the people. I agree with that too, that the hour, which I think is what it currently is right now. It's 60 minutes, right? It boots you off at 60 minutes.
Yeah, we can extend.
Services. Okay. So there's that. But my other question is, how many computer stations are we going to have available? Is there, is there going to be disinfecting of the station once a patron leaves before another patron can use that station, or will they alternate which stations are available? What's the spacing? How many are going to be available at a time? Those are all those other pieces, which I'm sure you're thinking about as well. But I think that's, something that's important that we all remember too, is that not every computer station is going to be available at
Very
all
true.
times, and kind of how that's going to work, what that's going to look like too.
Yeah, that is true. We would provide for at least 6 feet of space between computers, as well as provide for a cleaning opportunity between use. And we will have limited PCs up and running. We would also alternate the PCs that are used on one day versus the next day. And we have the ability to do that through software, so.
Okay, thank you.
You got direction on that one?
Yep. Are you ready to move on?
Yep.
Okay, will the hours return to normal, or will there be specific days to open to the public? We kind of touched upon that, but most of the libraries, I think every one I spoke with, were opening on, I'll put it this way, they will be staffing with normal hours. Some will have shifts and opening times, but staffing wise, they will be like, let's say 9 to 9. We'd be 9:30 to 9. And then it would be up to us to determine when we allow the public in the building. Would it be from 9:30 to 9? Or will it be from 9:30 to 12:30 and then have a break and then open again?
What are you recommending?
Originally, I had it open 9 to 9, but I'm warming to the idea of having maybe an hour break in between the day, in between the shifts of morning, afternoon, evening.
I like that idea.
Does everybody agree with the directors? And then we could go around for question and comment, show of hands. If you agree. All right.
Maybe if someone has a comment.
I am. So Treasurer Norton, we'll start with you and I'll go.
I'm just thinking, I expected Trustee Duffy to put both hands up. This is so yes, in support of that, I give 2 hands up for this as well.
Trustee Sullivan? Good.
2 hands up.
Okay. Secretary Swistak?
I'm good.
Okay. Vice President Bartelli, any question, comment?
No, I'm good.
Trustee Duffy?
I'm good.
Okay. Trustee Larson?
I'm good with it, but could we also do like a special thing, like maybe, maybe Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays? Like for an hour, people that, are more vulnerable, that they could be allowed in before
Like
the general public?
Like
I
the
mean,
senior
usually
hours?
So Trustee Larson is talking about having a special hour or 2 or whatever we determine for a more vulnerable population.
Is there any, like the senior, I get the equivalent like the senior hours at the grocery store? Any thought? You got 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, 3 thumbs up. We all good with that? Is staff okay with that idea?
Yeah.
So we're good with that?
I will say this, I mean, having that option I think is a good option, but there's been a lot of question about what is the vulnerable population? How do you define who that is? I mean, we can provide that information, but a lot of libraries are also saying you self-define. So, anyone could say, I am a vulnerable person, and that's why I'm here at 9:30. So, I mean, I think we need to allow for that flexibility if we're going to go that route. Sound good?
Whatever you decide is fine with me.
Okay, let's move on. Should the elevator be restricted to one patron or one family at a time? There was a unanimous yes, and I'm in agreement with that one.
Does everybody agree with that one? Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody got anything to add, or everybody good? Okay, well, that was a quick one.
Yeah. Will study rooms remain closed, or will they serve as offices for staff who cannot maintain social distance within their own offices? There was a unanimous closing of all study spaces and or repurposing those spaces for staff who work in close proximity with each other, and I'm in agreement with that. And especially if we're not doing any programming, having people hang out and study or group, I don't think it's the time for that.
The question I have really quick is are you going to have to use some of those rooms for staff?
I imagine so.
Are we all in favor of that?
Okay.
No. Any comments on that? Oh, okay.
All right.
Next one.
And then we get to Trustee Swistak's point about how will libraries manage browsing, as in when a patron pulls a book and then wants to return it to the shelf, and will they continue to quarantine? So most libraries are providing or will provide carts with signage asking that patrons return items to the carts. And then instead of quarantining them because they won't be checked out in our system, those books will be wiped down with antibacterial wipes. I'm more in favor of this in terms of, because I don't imagine there'll be that many. Most people and this is a guess, people who come into the library can browse the shelves, browse the movies, pull off what they would want. And if they pull off one or two and put it on the cart, where we have the supplies to be able to wipe something down with some alcohol solution and then be able to reshelve them. But it's up to you if you want to, we can check them out on a dummy card and then put them in quarantine for 4 more days. So that's the question. But I like having carts out available with a lot of signage, asking people to return them to the carts. We will have pages in the building and monitoring, but we can't police every single person in the building. So part of it is going to be, well, hoping that patrons follow signage, which is always a challenge. But we will have staff roaming and making sure and trying to keep track of what's happening in our building.
Now, my question is if the patron has like gloves on, would that change it or?
I mean, that's helpful, but I would still want everything that's pulled off a shelf placed on a cart so that we can still treat it.
And then second question is, are we going to have enough like wipes for all the stuff, like for this and other things we're going to be wiping down?
Well, if we ever ran into a situation where we didn't have enough masks or wipes, I mean, we would have to adjust exactly. But right now, yes, we do.
Okay, so does everybody agree with the staff recommendation?
Yes.
Good. Anybody have a question, comment, anything to add?
Just will quarantine time limits continue as is? And until libraries receive system direction, yes, all the libraries are continuing to quarantine their materials. So I think we're all in consensus with that. I hope.
Yeah, we all good with that, I'm assuming. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then will the library supply or apply directional aisles like the grocery stores? I mean, there was like a 50-50, some will, some won't. I think we've all experienced the grocery stores. I'm not sure people really follow that. And I don't want to over sign everything. I want to make sure that if we see there are people in the aisles, we can ask one at a time. But I mean, it's up, if you'd like us to do that, we'd be happy to do that.
What's everybody's thought on the directional items? Raise your hand if you're in favor of it. All right, so we will go, I'll go down, we'll do it alphabetical, I guess. Vice President Bartelli.
I say no to directional aisle.
Any reason or just no?
I don't think.
I think no one wants them.
Not much compliance.
All right, it's Trustee Duffy.
Yeah, I agree to not using the directional aisles because I don't think it's also very feasible for our space where we have some tight knit areas and I mean, at this point, and if everyone's wearing masks and everything, it should be okay.
So is pretty much everybody know to that then, and unless anybody's got anything else to add?
Just, keep the option open if you start to run into trouble. Hope that you don't need it. Hope that the grab and go is really grab and go.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I know the directional aisles in the grocery store. I try to obey them, but inevitably you go the wrong way. So it would be hard to manage. I guess that's fine.
Okay. All right. So we're at the bottom of our list. I do want to share that as of now, most surrounding libraries have changed their reopen date to Monday, July 6th or later instead of July 1st. A lot of libraries were looking at July 1st, but due to the July 4th holiday closing, they're looking at the 6th. And then as of today, I've heard from Downers Grove, Woodridge, LaGrange, Hinsdale, and they're all going to shoot for July 6th with the option to extend that. So I wanted to know where the trustees sat. How anxious are you for us to open? Or do you think say July 15th, like a month from today?
I think July 6th, I'll go around, we'll do reverse order. Secretary Swistak.
For me personally, because I don't think I'll be coming into the library for a while. I haven't even gone to grocery store, so I'm not even one of those people that knows what it's like with the directional aisles. So for me, it's more a question of what does staff feel most comfortable with? What does staff feel, when does staff feel they will be adequately prepared for reopening? Those are the bigger questions for me. Just because, again, I personally am not venturing into buildings yet. So that part doesn't matter for me. It's really more of what's going to work best for staff and when are they going to be adequately prepared to open the building?
So does staff feel comfortable with it?
Can I hear everybody's?
Well, right. Trustee Sullivan.
The reason that I favor July 6th is because there'll probably be more people out of town and it might be, a soft opening. And so if there are issues with reopening, it might be a better time to do it. But I'll leave that up to you, Tatiana.
For Norton.
I think just like with curbside, this library and its leaders know how to pick the right timing, and I support whatever staff and the director decide in this case.
Okay, and Trustee Larson.
I think July 6th.
She said she was for July 6th. Trustee Duffy.
Yeah, I don't care whether it's July 6th or middle of July. I care about is the plan that the staff and director puts together, fully vetted, fully thought through, on point. If you guys, the staff, need those additional days, move past July 6th to make sure that everything is on point and the safety of the patrons is there, take it. I mean, if you can accomplish it by July 6th and you feel comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with that as well. I just don't want to rush it arbitrarily to July 6th when the plan is not ready to be executed. That would be my only concern.
Vice President Bartelli.
I concur with Trustee Duffy, but I am good with July 6th, but I think it's wholly dependent on staff that we can do it by that date.
Do you feel comfortable about a July 6th date?
Is that everybody?
Yep.
Okay. Right now, that's a target, but we are still awaiting a couple of more pieces of equipment. I know the majority of you can't see, but we do have some acrylic shields in the building, and we are waiting on a couple more pieces. For some reason, there's been a delay on some of them, but I am comforted in hearing that you are comfortable with staff being ready, and I appreciate that. So I think we got through that list. I'll finish up my director's report. I know we have more to go. The communications coordinator initiated a postcard survey, as I mentioned, and that postcard survey was placed inside every curbside bag for the last couple, I'd say the last week and a half, to gauge patron experiences. And I first want to talk about curbside service because a few days after our May meeting, we initiated it. So it seems like we've been doing it forever, but for those in the public who are watching this, we did initiate it on May 18th, and it's available from 11 to 7 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturdays. You do have to register for a pickup slot, and this is a service that is reserved only for district patrons. All of the instructions are available on lisleLibrary.org. All of the materials that are provided by a curbside are past a quarantine time, and that is 4 days. And then patrons can schedule a pickup time using our online calendar, and we do hold those pickups for 7 days. So once you have a pickup time confirmed, patrons drive up to the library's employee parking lot, and that's off of Front Street, and you park where there are curbside pickup signs. We have 3 signs out there, and then patrons call the library, and then the prompts let them speak to a staff member just to show that they've arrived. And then a staff member comes out wearing a mask. They place the items out on a book cart, and then once the staff member steps away, the patron can come out and pick up their items. So it's been going very well, and after a month's worth of curbside pickup service, the library has distributed over 6,268 items to our residents. And there's a little chart, as I've mentioned before, in the director's report indicating the number of reservations, the pickups, and the items that have been circulated. And the staff have worked really hard to provide a very smooth experience for everybody. They've also made some accommodations for a few patrons during this unique time in our history. So I did provide a sheet that our communications coordinator provided. We had 26 surveys received as of yesterday, and the questions were in the director's report, but the first 2 questions were, was the curbside pickup convenient, and were the staff helpful? And there was unanimous 26 yeses to those questions. And then out of the 26, we had a question about how did you hear about curbside service? And so 12 patrons said they heard it through our website, 5 via a phone call, 4 via social media, and 3 via word of mouth, and then 1 via the email notification that we sent out. And then out of the 26 surveys, there was a question about, should we continue curbside service? And 16 stated that they would like us to continue curbside service. 6 patrons stated they would not need it to continue, and 4 were neutral, where they indicated a yes and a no. And then there's some extra comments there. So I thought that was a nice little batch, and we should have more coming, and we'll provide this report to you as we receive more. So that's that. And then lastly, in my director's report, I do want to mention, yes, we are conducting an online and curbside summer read experience this year. We launched this on Monday, June 15th with online registration for kids, teens, and adults, so everybody can participate. The program ends August 24th, so that's 10 weeks of reading fun for everyone. And all of the instructions are on the Lisle Library District website, and we have it also on social media. So we're not only reading and logging books, but there are also take and make craft kits for adults, teens, and we've got some new adventure kits for the kids. So I hope everyone will partake in this enjoyable and unique experience, even though it's kind of a new experience for everybody this year. So that is my report.
Any other questions on the director's report? I'll go reverse order. Secretary Swistak, any questions, comments? Trustee Sullivan? No. Excuse me, Treasurer Norton?
No, just great job with curbside.
Trustee Larson?
Nothing.
Trustee Duffy? Good. Vice President Bartelli, any questions on the director's report?
No.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the assistant director's report. Before we get to, is everybody good? You guys need to take a quick break, or you want to just keep going? Keep going? Everybody good? Okay. Assistant director's report.
Just if there's any
Do
questions.
you have any questions on the assistant director's report? We will go first. Vice President Bartelli. Any questions or comments on the assistant director's report?
Beth, when you mentioned Monaco Mechanical repair to compressor equipment on one air conditioning unit, that's with the assumption that the other 4 units checked out fine.
The other 3, yes.
3, I'm sorry, 3, yes.
Yes.
Okay, and also Johnson Controls, no, I'm sorry. What was I going to ask you on this? Oh, the Chicago Metro Fire Prevention paragraph. A few items were noted for repair, such as ceiling heat detector that was 15 years old. What is their recommendation as far as, is that something we
Oh,
replace?
it's been fixed.
We just did?
It's fixed. They put in a new heat detector.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Trustee Duffy.
Nothing for me.
Trustee Larson.
Nothing for me.
Treasurer Norton.
Nothing, thank you.
Trustee Sullivan.
Nothing, thank you.
And Secretary Swistak.
Nope, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is new business. First, we got a bunch of resolutions and ordinances. First one, 11A, adopt resolution 20-01, Lisle Library District Board members. Can I have a motion on 11A?
This is Trustee Duffy. I move to adopt resolution 20-01, Lisle Library District Board members, an annual resolution of true and correct list of current LLD board members.
This is Jenny Norton, I second.
All right. Anything that is pretty
Discussion? No.
self-explanatory. Anybody question or comment, or we're gonna just take a roll call?
Yes.
You all good? Roll call.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Emily Swistek,
Aye.
Martin Bartelli,
Aye.
Karen Larson,
Aye.
Liz,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
All right, motion passes. Next item is 11B, adopt ordinance 20-01, ordinance authorizing non-resident. Have a motion, please.
I move to adopt, this is Jenny Norton, I move to adopt ordinance 20-01, ordinance authorizing non-resident cards, and annual ordinance authorizing public library non-resident cards by the tax bill method.
Trustee Duffy, I second.
We got a motion and a second. Director, do you want to add something?
I could just quickly recap. Every year we adopt this ordinance. It's when the Lisle Library is the nearest library to a resident who does not have a local library, and the resident can pay for an LLD card. We use the tax bill method where the property assessed value is used to calculate the amount. All info is on the website where it reads, a non-resident homeowner fee shall be equitable and proportionate to the fee paid by the Lisle Library District residents and shall be determined by multiplying the current tax rate per DuPage County by the net taxable value of the home.
All right, any questions or comments on this one? Roll call.
Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Karen Larson. Aye. Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Emily Swissack,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye, motion passes. Next item is 11C, adopt ordinance 20-0, meeting date ordinance. We have two options, so whoever wants to make a motion on what they prefer, then we could probably have a discussion.
I'll go for it. I move to adopt ordinance 20-02, meeting date ordinance draft 1, an annual setting of regular board meetings for the Lisle Library District.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, so the motion was for draft 1, which is the current setup, I believe, for the second Wednesday of the month.
Right. So every year we do adopt an ordinance setting the meeting dates. This year we have two drafts, one being the second Wednesday of the month, draft 2 showing the third Wednesday of the month. So the reason we did this is because every year we run into some months where we have where the financial statements cannot be pulled in time for the trustees to review the board packet when we use the second Wednesday of the month. We've also had some holiday conflicts in the past, especially with New Year's, where we're closed, and Labor Day, and what? And July 4th sometimes, yes. So that's why there are two drafts, and it's up for discussion.
So, I'll just go, we'll do it alphabetically. If you have a preference on keeping it the second Wednesday, which is the motion, or if you have interest in switching it to the third Wednesday. So Vice President Bartelli, any question or comment or on this, or you're just good with it?
Well, I may have misunderstood that we were voting on draft 1. I would prefer that we go to the third Wednesday of the month.
Yeah, and that's fine. We're having a discussion. So we can either do one or two things. We could actually go do a roll call on this, or we could draw the motion at a certain time. So, but you would prefer moving it to the third Wednesday?
Yes, for the reasons Director mentioned.
Trustee Duffy.
I mean, I'm fine either way. I guess my preference is the 20-02, so the one that has the July 8th on there, but yeah.
Trustee Larson.
I would prefer the draft 2, the third Wednesday of the month.
So you're.
Trustee Larson said she'd preferred the draft 2.
Treasurer.
Well, I made the motion for draft 1 and I didn't do it accidentally. I have a slight preference for keeping it where it is. just thinking about, while some holidays do fall earlier in the month, I know ones that people tend to go out of town for tend to be later in the month. And so I just didn't want us to bump up against those things, and sort of keep it simple, keep it where it is. We have a working method, but I'm also fine with whatever the majority wants.
Trustee Sullivan.
I'd prefer draft 2.
And then Secretary Swistak.
I have a question on draft 2. It has August 12th, which is the second Wednesday in August and not the 3rd. And I was just curious
a
why that
mistake.
one was a second instead of a 3rd.
It's because of the 30 days we have to have for the beginning of.
Okay, so that was intentional, and that is August, September. That is the 30 days prior to the BNA. We need 30 days
Okay.
ahead. So that's why that is adjusted. And we actually do that every year dependent on, because we have to allow for that 30 days.
Okay. I prefer draft 2.
So you want the
Third
third
Wednesday.
day? Third week. Okay. The staff have a problem.
As I mentioned, the procurement of the financial statements is always a push. If the board is fine with not receiving their packet on the Friday, or at least the financials on the Friday, then I'm okay with keeping it as is. But the financials may have to, I mean, we've had this before,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
the financials come like on the Monday
Yeah.
of the board meeting week.
It's not often, but yeah, but sorry, I didn't interrupt.
That's okay. I mean, this is a board decisions, but so, I mean, that's why the recommendation for the 3rd was, I mean, that would allow for that without any issues of pulling those statements.
So the only other question I had is, as far as like timing of paying bills, because you know how we have to review it and then we approve it as a board and then they get paid. If we wait to the 3rd Wednesday, would that cause an issue with the payment of any bills, or would we have to, I mean, I suppose we could do this 2 parts if it makes any, we would have the trustees come in, the 2 that have to review, normally would have to come in maybe a week early. Like it would have been like the 2nd week, and then we could still do it again.
We can adjust that, and we probably have a 1 month of where we would have to do an adjustment of everything. We pay bills mid-month as well, so that happens anyway.
Does anybody else have any other question or comment on this? Anybody question or comment? So we kind of have a split decision. There's a couple ways. I mean, well, Trustee Norton made the motion, Trustee Bartelli seconded the motion. So we could do a roll call and vote in, and if draft 1 was for the 2nd week, and so if you vote yes, you're keeping the 2nd week. If you're voting no, the motion fails, and then we could bring a new motion, which would be draft number 2. So would we rather do it that way probably, or it's probably
Roll
just.
call, Tom.
Yeah, just
Why don't
roll
we
call. Just-
Okay, let's do roll call. So just to refresh, voting yes is to keep it week 2, voting no with motion fails. And then we'll have to do a new motion. So
Roll call.
Jenny Norton,
Nay.
Marjorie Bartelli,
No.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Karen Larson,
No,
Liz Sullivan,
No,
and Liz Swistak,
Nay.
Thomas Hummel.
I'll vote no. The motion fails 6-1.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Duffy, that.
Yeah.
All right, we need to entertain another
So now
motion.
we have to make another motion. Somebody can make a motion to approve draft number 2.
Yes.
I move to adopt ordinance 20-02, meeting date ordinance draft number 2. And annual setting, or here, sorry, accepting, oh my gosh, am I lost? No, an annual setting of regular board meetings for the Lisle Library District.
I'll second.
And second, any other question or comment, discussion on this? Or we already had it, we're good? Roll call.
And Liz was the second.
Yeah,
Yes.
this was second, yes. Jenny, Treasurer Norton.
Aye.
Sullivan,
I'm sorry?
Liz Sullivan,
Oh, okay. I want to know how Duffy's going to vote. I will vote aye.
Karen Larson,
Aye.
Emily Swiftbay,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Thomas Duffy,
The spite in me tells me to say no, but I'm going to go aye.
All right.
Thomas Hummel.
How about aye? So all in favor, motion passes to do draft number 2, and we will now meet on the 3rd Wednesdays of the month. All righty, now because of that, we have to do 11D, approve LLD policy 200 board bylaws, action required. We have to modify the board policy 200 to say that the meetings are now on the 3rd Wednesday. Can I get a motion? It's on that sheet, 11D.
I move, this is Trustee Duffy. I move to approve LLD policy 200, board bylaws, accepting modifications to LLD policy 200, board bylaws.
I'll second.
All right, do you need to add anything, Director?
No, it's just changing second to third.
Any question, comments on this, or we're good? All right, roll call, please.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Emily Swiftbay,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Karen Larson,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is 11E, adopt ordinance 20-03, ordinance amending LLD budget and appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2019, 2020. Can I have a motion, please?
This is Trustee Duffy. I move to adopt 20-03, ordinance amending LLD budget and appropriate ordinance for fiscal year 2019 to 2020. An amendment of LLD budget and appropriation ordinance 19-03 under 75 ILCS 16-3090B, authorizing the appropriation for maintenance and repairs to be decreased from 111-240.00 to 104-240, and the appropriation for .02 building maintenance fund be increased to $22,000 from $15,000, not affecting the total amount appropriated in fiscal year 2019 to 2020.
I'll second.
Trustee Sullivan, Director Weinstein, you want to?
Yeah, I'll elaborate. So agenda item 11E is an ordinance amending the BNA. This ordinance permits us to shift $7,000 from one line to another in the current BNA without affecting the total amount appropriated. The reason for doing this is just before the former finance director's departure last year, during our auditing process, the finance director incorrectly advanced some .02 expenditures into this year. Then we conducted our audit for 18-19. So our current parameters do not allow for the $7,000, they don't accommodate for those $7,000 of expenses unless we amend the B&A. So we found this error after months of onboarding our outsourced finance firm, Sikich, as well as reviewing the past audit and then backtracking through our records. And we intended to handle this issue in February with legal consultation. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. So thankfully, we've accounted for this issue. And then we've also already consulted with our attorney. So this amendment will allow for a clean process for our upcoming 2020 audit. We've also had a phone conference with Lauterbach and Amen, that's our auditor, and we have scheduled more calls for the future regarding preparation for our audit field work in the next coming months, and those should begin in August.
Any question or comment on this item?
No.
None? All right, roll call, please.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Emily Swissack,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Karen Larson. Aye. Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye, motion passes. Next item is 11F, adopt resolution 20-02, resolution to abolish working cash fund. The motion, please.
This is Liz Sullivan. I move to adopt Resolution 20-02. It's a resolution to abolish the working cash fund, an abolishment of the working cash fund established under 75 ILCS 16/30-95, and to direct the transfer of any balance in the fund, including any interest that has accrued, to the corporate library fund, and as established by the LLD B&A ordinance 19-03.
Motion and a second.
This is Duffy. I
I'll
second.
second. Oh, Tom.
Trustee Duffy got it. All right, Director Weinstein, want to?
Okay, agenda item 11F is a resolution to abolish the working cash fund. This must be done in a two-step process statutorily. First, the board abolishes the fund via a resolution, and funds are deposited into the corporate fund. And then by ordinance, coming up, the board approves of a transfer into special reserve. The board has previously determined and approved via the B&A to abolish the working cash fund and then to move the funds into special reserve. There is a footnote on the approved B&A posted on the website, and that's B&A 19-03.
Does anybody have any question or comment on this topic?
No.
No? Okay, roll call, please.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Emily Swissack,
Aye.
Marjorie Bartelli,
Aye.
Karen Larson. Aye. Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Motion passes. Next item is 11G. Adopt ordinance 20-04, transfer of funds to special reserve fund, including working cash fund monies. Can I have a motion, please?
I move, this is Sullivan, I move to adopt ordinance 20-04, transfers of fund to special reserve fund, including working cash fund monies, a transfer of $420,900 from the corporate library fund to the special reserve fund under 75 ILCS 16/40-50, and is established by the LLD B&A ordinance 19-03.
Is there a second?
I second.
Trustee Swissack.
Secretary Swissack. Yep.
Secretary Swissack, sorry. Director Weinstein, you have anything to add on this?
No,
one?
this is just the second step.
Okay. Any question, comment, or discussion on this? Roll call, please.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Emily Swissack,
Aye.
Marjorie Rotelli,
Aye.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Karen Larson,
Aye.
Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye, motion passes. Next item is 11H. Now the payment of earned and non-used vacation time is required by Illinois Wage Payment and Collection Act, P20 ILCS 115/5. First payment shall not exceed $809.03 to be paid to Julie Beck. Second payment shall not exceed $3,819.60 to be paid to Mary Bannon. So that just needs to be read aloud. Next item on the agenda is 12, opportunity for trustee comments. Let's go with trustee Duffy first.
Yeah, I don't really have anything, so thank you.
All right. Vice President Bartelli.
I'd just like to mention that I did attend the Economic Development Commission meeting last week. Informative as to what the village is doing to assist our businesses on Main Street. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Secretary Swistak.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the director and staff for all the hard work they've continued to do with the curbside pickup, initiating a virtual summer read that started this past Monday. I did the curbside pickup for the adult and teen craft kit today, the do-it-yourself bird feeder, and I'm very excited to put it together. And so I'm really appreciative of the fact that while we can't come into the building for programs, they're still offering program opportunities for curbside pickup to take home. And so I'm just really impressed with the director and staff for continuing to work hard to make sure that the community is involved in everything that's going on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Sullivan.
I'd like to echo what Trustee Secretary Swistak said. And thank Tatiana and the staff for all their hard work. These are trying times. There's no, there's no book to follow in terms of how to handle this. So I think you're doing a really good job, Tatiana. And I know you must go home just thinking about all these different things and the trials and tribulations that you're going to have to face tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank you.
Treasurer Norton.
Nothing further, just thank you and glad to be here.
And Trustee Larson.
Yeah, thank you, Tatiana, for all your hard work. You mentioned during the emails, like, wow, the website pickups and everything that's going on. Yeah. Lots of hard work by everybody.
So in case you didn't hear Trustee Larson, just thank the director for the hard work. And I'll go last and same thing. I'll just repeat. I agree. I thank the director and staff for doing a good job, and the communication has been good. So hopefully someday we'll get back to normal. Last item is adjourn. Is that a motion to adjourn? And we're actually going to have to do roll call on this. Motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Larson. Trustee Larson got it. Any question or comment on adjournment? Roll call, please.
Liz Sullivan,
Aye.
Karen Larson,
Aye.
Thomas Duffy,
Aye.
Jenny Norton,
Aye.
Emily Swistak,
Aye.
Marjorie Rotelli,
Aye.
Thomas Hummel.
Aye, motion passes. We are adjourned at 9:53 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.